In Vedic astrology, the planetary relationships, it's probably the most important concept when it comes to whether a planet is healthy or not. So every planet is treating every other planet as either a friend, as neutral, or as an enemy. And that is determined by whether the planet's in an enemy's house or a friend's house, or a friend's sign, or is receiving aspects from those planets. So this is called Lajatati Avashtas. And essentially that just means the planetary relationships, the conditions of a planet based on those relationships. So each force of human nature, each planet has an agenda and does something specific to us. And if the planet is being affected by an enemy, that makes that agenda harder to fulfill. And the same goes with a friend. It makes that planet's agenda easier to fulfill if a friend is helping it. So if you'd like to know more about your Lajatati Avashtas, it's a very important part of my written report, and you can find that at jmvedic.com. What's so valuable about the planetary relationships and the Lajatati Avashtas is that we can learn so much about the planets themselves by simply asking the question, why is this planet an enemy to that planet? And what makes those two incompatible? And so it's an exercise in contemplation of the nature of the planets and to see what they're really doing, to really think about what is this planet really doing? Why is this planet an enemy? And the more you contemplate these relationships and the natures of each planet, you're going to discover so much more, because there's so much to human nature. There's so much to who we are as human beings and how the planets are influencing that. So everything that I'm saying, you can really take this and run with it. And really, again, it's all about contemplating and thinking deeply about these ideas. So I mentioned this in the first of the Venus videos, that Venus is, to me, the least understood of the planets from the perspective of how much depth is in this force in our consciousness. And it's the least fully understood. And what I find so interesting about Venus is the planets that Venus is treating as its enemies, so the sun and the moon. So the sun and the moon are the divine masculine and the divine feminine. And these two forces are most concerned with, are the two planets that create our core identity of who we are. They're probably the two most important planets, the two planets that we pay attention to the most, because they have such a fundamental impact on our core self. And so the sun is first how we're connecting with our divine self, our soul, and seeing that we have a commonality between all of the people because we all have a divinity to us, we all have a soul. And then to be able to actively follow our soul's unique path and to be able to do that in a healthy way, that's the sun force. Whereas the moon force is our ego, and the sense that we're separate from all other beings, and that we have unique desires and we have unique needs. So I'm going to get into Venus here in a moment, but first it's important to really understand the sun and the moon. So the stronger our sun is and the more healthy it is, the more we're growing in self-confidence and ultimately self-love. And also then being able to spread that love to other people and be able to see the divinity in other people, just as you're seeing the divinity in yourself. And so it helps other people open up to their divinity the more that you're expressing this ability to see the power that you have as an individual person, and to be able to grow in that power, and that is to grow in our solar consciousness. And then that equates to being able to love yourself. And then the stronger the moon is, the stronger we grow in understanding our unique personality and our identity, how we see ourselves as this person with a different name than other people, this person with unique needs and desires. And so likewise, we're growing to love ourselves, just as how we're growing to love ourselves with the sun, we grow to love ourselves with a healthier and healthy moon. And we can nurture ourselves, and then that leads to being able to nurture other people, to take care of them. So both the sun and the moon are helping us to grow in loving ourselves and to be able to extend that love to other people. And of course, they're doing that in slightly different ways. So these two planets, the sun and the moon, very much have to do with everything that we call love. And I mean the deeper kind of love, which transforms into our ability to love others. But it's a very internal sense of love that the sun and the moon are operating on. So it's so interesting to then think that the planet of love, the so-called planet of love, Venus, is an enemy to the sun and the moon. So this gets to the heart at the different types of love that exist. In English, we have one word, love. People kind of use that single word and throw so much different kinds of meaning in that one word. But then think about kind of corollaries to what love is. We also have words like appreciation. We have tenderness, affection, consolation or consoling other people, supporting other people. These are all kind of derivatives of what love is. These are all loving actions. But the thing is we don't really equate them to love. Love is its own separate, bigger thing. But they are still different forms of love. But then you think about Sanskrit. Sanskrit has 96 words for love, and they all have a unique, they're all based on that same fundamental expression, that underlying action and feeling of what love is, but there's different varieties of them. Unfortunately, in English, we simplify love way too much into this one concept. And that's where Venus gets really confused, because it's so much more than love, and it's really more of a superficial kind of love, which I'll talk about now. So the type of love that Venus is feeling, Venus is a water planet, it's an emotional planet. It's the type of love of Venus is feeling taken care of by things that are outside of us. So Venus is this force that looks out towards other people and situations to fulfill something that we don't already have within us, or something that we want to take into our life that's going to give us more pleasure or more understanding, to enhance our lives and to give us overall greater sense of fulfillment. And the key word is outside of us. Venus is all about seeing what's around us and bringing those things into us in order to make our lives run smoother. It's a very important function of life, which we've talked so much about in the other Venus videos. The sun and the moon, however, the enemies of Venus, are generating love within us. They are generating love, and the healthier they are, the more that we can feel love within us. And then so the sun generating the ability to work towards a better life, to build a better life through consistency. And then the moon being able to feel a camaraderie with oneself and to love who you are as a unique person, and then to be able to express that outwards and to be able to also receive love from other people. But the key is that they're coming from within us. It's a completely different thing than the love and understanding of love that Venus generates. So that's the fundamental reason why Venus is incompatible with the sun and the moon. So Venus is seeking fulfillment from the world, and the sun and the moon are seeking fulfillment from within ourselves in their own unique ways. And you can watch the solar and lunar consciousness videos, the sun and the moon videos, to really get into depth, much more in depth about what the sun and the moon are doing. So now let's talk about the specifics of first what the sun is doing, how the sun negatively affects Venus when the sun and Venus are conjunct, which is very common. The sun and Venus rarely move from over a sign apart. They're rarely 2 signs apart. And of course, when Venus is in the sun's sign Leo. So this is what is going to how the solar consciousness will negatively affect the Venus consciousness if in your natal chart you have this configuration. But also keep in mind that as we develop through our lives, we're developing each planet, and we can create a more toxic Venus, or we can create a healthier Venus. So it's not necessarily in your natal chart. If you don't have a sun conjunct Venus, or your Venus is not in Leo, you can still have some of these qualities because the Venus consciousness has grown more unhealthy over time. So first of all, a basic Venus-Sun conjunction, when Venus is getting hit by the sun's powerful rays, we say Venus is agitated. Any planet that's conjunct the sun is agitated. It's basically the brightness of the sun, it overshadows the brightness of that planet, or the ability for that planet to really express itself fully. The sun is overpowering it. And very importantly, the closer the sun and Venus are in degrees, the more intense the agitation will become. If they're 15, 20, 25 degrees away from one another in the same sign, it's going to be much more slight. But if they're 5 degrees, 1 degree, 10 degrees inwards between the sun and Venus is going to create this effect much more strongly. So Venus is the force, is that, again, finding things outside of us that'll make our lives run easier and smoother. So Venus has this soothing and calming effect on us when it's healthy. Life is, when life is easier, we can relax more. We don't have to have so many troubles. We're able to see the bigger picture of something, or we can just be calm and fluid in what we're doing. And we're placing ourselves in a greater state of mental and physical comfort. And that could be expressed as, say, being a person that can take really great vacations that are really fulfilling, but also they help you escape your daily life and you're not stressed out when you're on vacation. Fun vacations, or just laying by the pool kind of vacations. Or Venus can be healthy and become more rejuvenated by being in the comfort of a party with close friends, a dinner party, being able to relax with close friends, doing something that is enjoyable in that sense, or just going to a day spa, going swimming, or just sitting on your couch and watching TV to unwind after a day of hard work. So Venus has this effect when it's healthy to be able to make our lives more comfortable, and doing it through outside activities, bringing things into our lives that are rejuvenating us. And then, of course, long-term comforts and being able to, say, depend on a spouse for emotional support, or to improve your overall value, the overall value of your life and the value of the life of your loved one, and having that stability of a companionship with someone. That's a long-term comfort that Venus helps us to do. So the sun really has nothing to do with relaxing like this. That calming effect, and that calming effect we get when we're not working. So Venus is exalted in Pisces, the sign of contemplation and liberation from material concerns. But the sun, again, has nothing to do with that. It does a completely different thing in our consciousness. It's the force that is pushing us from within to build a stable life in the form of what we refer to as a kingdom, or the realm from which you're operating from, the world that you create around you. So building a kingdom requires a lot of effort, and it requires a lot of just hard work. It requires a career and income, and it requires, even if you're someone who has inheritance and you don't have to work, you're living in the kingdom of someone else's work. A healthy kingdom is built on your own efforts. And so that kingdom and that world that you're building requires consistency in activity, going out and doing things, and it requires being responsible for people who depend on you. So a healthy sun is going to be doing a lot of hard work, which ultimately is very fulfilling to the soul, our soul. So as you can see, they're two completely different planets. So when Venus is conjunct the sun, Venus can feel like the work is never done. There's never time to relax. It's being overpowered by the necessity to build, or the necessity to expend effort, and that there's always something left to do, or something to accomplish, and something to build. Ambitions become very big in this kind of person, and relaxation, they just don't have enough time for it. They don't have enough time for their Venus because it's being overpowered by their need to do these solar activities. And a way that I like to visualize it, and I think it was Ernst Wilhelm who gave this example, but I think it is a great example that describes it so well. So imagine that if you're at work, at your job, and you're about to go on your lunch break, and you've been working hard, and I'm going to go down the street and buy a sandwich, and I'm going to sit at the table at the restaurant, and I'm just going to kind of relax, maybe catch up on something on social media, maybe read a chapter of a book, or just stare at the wall and just recover from the hard morning of work. And, sit there alone and just relax, or say maybe even with a coworker. Now, say in this situation where you want to go and have your lunch break, and your boss says, all right, I'm going to come with you. Immediately, you're in a situation, oh wow, now I can't relax. Now I can't just, allow my shoulders to, just be in a mental space where you're not thinking about work, or just being having a nice time alone. And so when the boss is with you, even if you're friends with the boss, even if you get along really well, you still have to be quote unquote you have to be kind of on top of things, and you can't just stare off into space. And so it just gives that extra tension. It gives that agitation. Instead of me just being able to have some time alone, a person who has authority over me is watching me and maybe subtly judging me. If you have a bad relationship with a boss, or you don't really get along with them, it just triples that tension. That's what the sensation of Venus and the Sun together is like. You just can't put the work down for a little while. There's always maybe someone looking over your shoulder, and even if it's not a physical person looking over your shoulder, it's that sense that you're consumed by this energy of authority, and that authority being the solar authority, that it's not time to relax, it's time to expend effort, and it's not time to relax yet. So that's what it feels like when Venus is unhealthy, that there's always something left to be done, or kind of an anxiety that you didn't do enough. So the beautiful part of our bodies is that our bodies never stop working, even when we're sleeping and when we're just sitting around and relaxing. So Venus is this planet of rejuvenating and refreshing ourselves, our physical self, our physical body, and also our mental self. And we need to have physical and mental states of relaxation in order for our bodies to keep doing the work that they're always doing, be digesting food, to be healing cells, to do all of these processes that we can't see because of our skin. But underneath, our body never stops working for us. So really, when we're having a healthy Venus, when we're relaxing, it's a kind of passive work. And it's the only way to refresh ourselves in order to avoid burning out. So a Venus being negatively affected by the Sun, this kind of person is going to more easily suffer from burnout and workaholic tendencies, and they're not giving their bodies enough time to do its own work. So I always like to think about relaxation as a nice form of work. There is a very strong, there's a very important function of doing nothing, or relaxing and enjoying yourself, taking your mind out of your daily tasks. And so that's a key thing that Venus is doing. But when the Sun is too close to Venus, or when Venus is in Leo, Venus is having a more difficult time to bring oneself into that physical and mental mind state. And so of course, when it comes to relationships, when the Sun and Venus when Venus is being negatively impacted by the Sun with relationships, what happens is that, so we have this Sun, our ambition, that we want to grow as an individual from the inside out. And Venus being the planet of relationships. When Venus is getting affected by the Sun, the personal relationships beyond friendships are going to be taking a back seat to ambitions, personal ambitions. And the result can often be a sense of loneliness, because there's a very strong individual drive to do something, and you don't feel, and there's this feeling that it's hard to find somebody that shares that exact same ambition. And the person will not prioritize creating win-win partnerships with people, because they feel like that is just going to distract them from what they really want to do as an individual. And sometimes, and we've kind of lost sight of this, but in traditional times, or in the past, partnerships, a lot of times the relationship, they really didn't have much in common. They had the basics in common, but nowadays we have this feeling like we need to be 100% on the same page about everything with our partner. And of course we need to be on the same page about important things, but if you don't agree on certain points of view of life, or if you don't enjoy the same activities of relaxation, that's okay. You don't have to. There's this problem with wanting to create this perfect relationship that fits exactly into a personal idea of what a relationship should be, or the ambition of the person. And so the Sun negatively affecting Venus, a person is so concentrated on a goal in life. And if the partner doesn't contribute to that specific goal, they feel like that partnership is not worth it, or they're going to have such specific needs and such specific desires for that partnership to fit into their master plan. And if the partner isn't fit into that perfectly, about this kind of very individualized idea of what the plan is, then the relationship's not worth it, or the relationship will start to break down. So the closer the conjunction is, the more potential the relationship will have for the person to be prioritizing themselves and their goals over being much more important than engaging in, say, a joint mission, or being able to look outside of one's own ambitions and to join up with somebody who has slightly different ideas, and to be able to find compatibility within that, instead of focusing on one's own self and where one needs to go, and only accepting a partner into life that is going to aid that mission. So that's what can happen when the sun is negatively affecting Venus, is that relationships just don't become a priority. They let relationships fall away that could have been really good, because they're too individually focused on the bigger picture for their own life. Instead of, say, bringing in someone into their life where you are able to grow with them, and to find and to not have to have everything absolutely in common with them. And what that is too much focus on oneself, instead of opening up and seeing what this other person can add into your life that maybe you didn't visualize before. So that's the effect of the sun on Venus when it comes to relationships. I find the Venus-Moon relationship especially interesting because, first of all, you would expect these two female water planets, so emotionally based planets, to get along with one another. They're so alike. And from that surface view, oh wow, these two would get along. But in fact, they cause a lot of trouble, especially when they're conjunct. And of course, when Venus is in the moon sign Cancer. So firstly, it creates especially when both the conjunction as well as the Venus in Cancer, it creates a very, very sensitive person. And whatever house that this conjunction, or whatever house that Venus in Cancer is in, that's the area of life where the person will be especially sensitive about. So if it's in the first house, they'll be very sensitive about their body. And if it's in the second house, they'll be very sensitive about their family. If it's in the fifth house, very sensitive about their creative capacity. If it's in the ninth house, they'll be very sensitive about their belief system, and so on. So it's not bad to be a sensitive person, but the oversensitivity that happens when there's this interaction between the sun, or between Moon and Venus, what it does is that the person will over-identify their ego with that house, with the characteristics of that house. And without that house, without the external manifestations of that house in question, the person is not going to feel completely fulfilled. It's like they can't get enough of that house. And they treat that house as like a crutch that they have to use to stand with in order to feel to be able to feel fulfillment in any way. And that's because the moon is our ego, and when our ego, our sense of I, is reaching outside of itself, what happens, so Venus, when it's connected with Venus, it's reaching outside, the ego is reaching outside and seeing Venusian things, to find things outside of us to fill the hole into our own identity. So when these two are connected, there's too much of the sense of I trying to find something outside of us to fill in an emotional need or emotional hole that we have that can only be filled within ourselves. The self-love and the love for ourselves that the moon creates, it gets too entangled with what can we find that is shiny and new, or what is Venusian pleasures that aren't in us but are outside of us. So that's the basic interaction. What's happening is looking for ego gratification from the external world. So of course, as the planet of relationships, the essential effect of this interaction is seeking that self-love that the moon generates, receiving love from another person. So relationships, the effect on relationships can become very intense. So these people, what can happen is they can become very dependent on the recognition and validation of other people in order to feel a basic sense of happiness. And they can have a very needy disposition, where the person who has the Venus being starved by the moon, they can end up being very nitpicky of their partner and trying to adjust the other person to fit their standards, and so that they're able to receive exactly the love that they feel they want, or that they want to get the exact love they're visualizing that their identity needs. So it can cause this trying to be tweaking and changing the partner in ways that maybe they don't want to change, or maybe it's not necessary for them to change, but there's this deep need to change them in order to get exactly what they want from the relationship. So for men with Venus in Cancer or Venus Moon conjunction, they can have a very wandering eye and see new women as a new chance to fulfill psychological needs that their old relationship wasn't fulfilling. Because again, it creates this dissatisfaction with partnerships, that the partnership isn't perfect. And these men can fall in love very easily. They can get entranced by a woman very easily. And they can at times be very promiscuous, depends on other factors. But they can also be very hurt by their partner. As I said, it's a very sensitive position, so that they can be easily emotionally affected by whatever their partner is doing. So with women with this same configuration, they can have a tendency to see their partner as never giving them enough, or never giving them the proper and complete fulfillment they feel that they deserve, and that there is always something else that needs to change about them, because internally they're suffering in some way, and they'll take out that emptiness that they're feeling inside of them on their partner. So they're struggling to receive the love that they're being given, whatever love that is, and they see the imperfections more than being grateful for the love that they're receiving, or that the relationship is extremely unfair towards them. So when the moon is causing these unhealthy tendencies in the Venus consciousness in general, in both men and women, the person will begin to draw into themselves and make the relationship primarily about their needs and wants, instead of creating a win-win partnership where both people are working to improve together. So it can lead to very self-centered behavior when the focus of the relationship is always on the person with the Venus being starved by the moon. And what this is that the relationship lacks a healthy autonomy between the two people. And as I mentioned, eventually it can create this deep emotional dependence on the other person, even when the relationship is unhealthy. If the relationship is healthy, they're still deeply emotional dependent, and that's going to create this inability to be able to do things alone, or to have this ability to be independent in healthy ways. But if the relationship is also toxic, they're still deeply emotionally connected to the other person, and then it kind of creates that vicious cycle of toxicness. So what I see the most is a deep sense of dissatisfaction in partnerships, and that somehow the partnership or the relationship is going to stagnate, and it's not going to be growing healthily upwards. So one important way to heal the Venus, when Venus is being affected by the moon in this way, is to simply create more autonomy and independence within the partnership. And as I was saying, in the past, it wasn't so important that a partner fit every single piece of criteria in order to invest in them. In very traditional societies, the woman is able to have babies, okay, that's enough for me, and she can work hard, that's all I need. They didn't need to have every political box checked that they agree on everything. They didn't have to have this perfect body and this perfect face. They just saw, this person is a nice person, they're going to work, let's create a family together. That's how simple it was, and those relationships could last a long time. They can be totally different people, but in the important parts, there was agreement. So in that situation, the two people had their own autonomy. They had their own independent things. They were different people, but they connected in the key ways, but not in every single way. And so it's important to create autonomy in relationships in that, and to enjoy not having to do every activity together, or to be always on the same page on every single little detail of life. And so the other way that's important for a person to heal this Venus is to not take any slights or any criticisms or any kind of these disagreements that you have extremely personally. That's what happens very often, is when Venus is being affected, the ability to have a healthy partnership. When the moon is affecting that, they can just, again, be too sensitive about any slight changes in a plan or any slight changes in what the two egos involved in the situation want. And again, taking things too personally, just kind of, it requires, when you have the ability to separate and create your own kind of independent mindset as an individual person, and to be able to be grateful and appreciative of the differences of the person that you're with. This is a very healthy way to use Venus, and to not try to get so much ego, self-satisfaction, because they're exactly the person that you want them to be. So another good way to conceptualize this is to, again, step away from this Western idea of falling in love, but instead to rise in love. And the idea that a relationship is this long-term opportunity to improve ourselves, and at the same time not forcing the other person to improve. So the other person in the relationship is naturally going to improve their character qualities, or at least be forced to observe the character qualities they need to improve when they see that you're improving in your own life. So one reason why arranged marriages tend to actually have a greater deal of success, say in India, and I'm not talking about when the girl gets married at 12 years old, but I'm talking about the arranged marriages. Why they work is because the two people eventually grow to love one another on a deeper level and grow on a nice healthy interdependence. And that why the divorce rate in Western countries is so much higher is that the people are trying to get every detail in line. And if they see even the slightest incompatibility, blowing that incompatibility out of proportion. So a healthy relationship grows over time. It's a long-term ability and opportunity. And when you fall in love, think about, you're sinking, you're going low. And it's just kind of a visualization, or, words really matter when we think about it. And it's so much healthier to imagine that you're rising in love. The love that you have with another person, the relationship, the emotional connection, the bond, is improving over time. You don't sink on a lower level. I fell in love. You've fallen down. No, you're going to rise gradually over time. And that idea of time is really important for the next video about how Venus's friends, first with Mercury. Venus and Mercury are basically best friends, but also Venus and the Saturn relationship was very, very interesting as well. And again, it teaches us so much about Venus that we wouldn't understand by just calling it the planet of love, because no planet treats Saturn as a friend, only Venus. And so in the next video, we're going to talk about how that relationship works and what meaning we can derive from Venus by that friendship with Saturn. Okay, until the next video.